I want to look here quickly at the difference between empirical formula and molecular formula. So the empirical formula shows the simplest whole number ratio of atoms of each element in a compound, whereas the molecular formula shows the actual number of atoms of elements present in the compound. So if we take an example, here is a compound. Okay, this compound is called ethane. And if you look at the actual compound itself, you can see there are 2 carbons and a total of 6 hydrogens. So this is C2H6. Now, because that is the actual number, 2 carbons and 6 hydrogens, that actually is then my molecular formula. So I can say my molecular formula for this compound is C2H6. However, because my empirical formula is the simplest whole number ratio, I can simplify down the ratio of 2 to 6. So 2 to 6 simplified down would be CH3 by dividing down by 2. So that gives me my empirical formula. Now, the reason why this can be useful is sometimes you might be told that the empirical formula of a compound is, say, for example, CH3, but maybe the MR of that compound, the relative molecular mass, might actually be something like 30. Well, if that's the case, I know that CH3 is 1 carbon and 3 hydrogens. So that should have an MR of 1 times 12 plus 3 times 1, which is equal to 15. But as I said earlier, we might be told that the empirical formula is CH3, but the MR should be 30. This clearly doesn't equal 30, so what must my molecular formula be? Well, if I know my molecular formula has to have an MR equal to 30, to go from 15 to 30, I have to multiply by 2. So therefore, I must multiply my empirical formula by 2, and then it becomes my C2H6. So just to summarize that again, the empirical formula gives you the simplest whole number ratio of atoms which are present in a compound, whereas the molecular formula gives you the actual number. So to go from your molecular formula to your empirical formula, it's just a simplification, okay, making sure you're simplifying everything down by the same number. Whereas the other way you can be asked questions in this might be you're given the empirical formula and you're given the MR of the actual compound. So to figure out your molecular formula from that information, you have to take your empirical formula, find what the mass of the empirical formula is, and then find out how many times you have to multiply that by to get the MR of the actual compound, and do exactly the same multiplication to your empirical formula to make it up to your molecular formula.